gesture. And
today we learned he did just that. Bannon telling the Weekly Standard, quote, "I feel jacked up. Now I'm free. I've got my hands back on my weapons." Someone said, "It's Bannon the Barbarian. I'm definitely going to crush the opposition. There's no doubt. I built a bleeping machine at Breitbart, and now I'm about to go back knowing what I know, and we're about to rev that machine up, and rev it up we will do." Joining me now is CNN senior media reporter Oliver Darcy. So, Oliver, even though he was forced out, Bannon there saying he's going to go to war for the president. What are you learning now about the plans he and Breitbart may have moving forward?
Right. Well, one person at Breitbart told me that they're already, starting the motion of going to war for Trump, as Steve Bannon says, by basically targeting the individuals that Bannon clashed within the Oval Office. You're looking at Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Dina Powell, General McMaster, and so those are the people I think we can look forward to in the next few weeks as Breitbart will start, kind of zeroing in on them and taking the battle to them.
So you really think that he is going to continue to defend the president? He doesn't have it out against him?
I'm not sure that we'll see Breitbart defend the president as much as we'll see Breitbart target the inner circle and say maybe, imply at least, that Trump's being misled by people who don't have his best interests at heart. And these are the things that Trump campaigned on, and we want him to follow through with his promises. We believe he wants to, but these people may be, not the best advisors. I think that's sort of the picture we'll see painted, and they'll target Jared Kushner and Gary Cohn and those individuals, saying that they're not giving him good advice.
Gotcha. So on the one hand, we have Bannon thinking his agenda is going to live on. On the other hand, he also said this to the Weekly Standard: the Trump presidency that we fought for and won is over. We still have a huge movement, and we will make something of this Trump presidency, but that presidency is over. It'll be something else, and there'll be all kinds of fights, and there'll be good days and bad days, but that presidency is over. So that emphasis on it is over, what does that mean?
I think, so there was a Breitbart editor the other day that was on TV, and he was saying that there's no real conservatives or populists in the White House anymore. If you look at the White House, it's certainly a little left-leaning. I mean, a lot of former Democrats are actually in the White House. So I think what Bannon's saying there is that, Trump was elected to be this nationalist, this populist, and the people he's surrounding himself with now don't really maybe hold those views or
but Trump makes the decisions, agenda. As we all know. How often is he listening to all the people who are around him? Ultimately, We've heard over and over again, he is the decision maker. Really interesting, though, when you look at a picture taken very early on in this presidency. This was back in January in the Oval Office. It shows the president's original circle. And take a look very closely. All of them, with the exception of the vice president there, Mike Pence, are gone. Every White House we know has some turnover, but just how remarkable is what we're seeing right now at this stage in the presidency?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely stunning. I don't think anyone, I certainly didn't expect this much turnover. I think maybe we expected, Reince to be out, but particularly in the beginning, it seemed like Bannon had a lot of power, and everyone was talking about, wow, he's installed himself on the National Security Council. He seems to be implementing the Muslim ban, etc. And it's just really remarkable now, a few months later, to see him forced out of the White House as most of the original staff is just gone.
Total turnover. Oliver Darcy, thanks so much.
Thank you, Anna.
Coming up here in the newsroom, disturbing news. Officers exchanged gunfire, shooting and killing that suspect. And on the same night in Pennsylvania, 2 state troopers were shot. The suspect was killed. Another police altercation is getting a lot of attention today, this time in Ohio. A recording capturing the violent beating of a black man by a police officer right outside one woman's window. We want to warn you, this video is graphic and disturbing.
What the fuck is doing, Mommy? Mommy, what the fuck is doing?
Oh my God. So he's punching him though.
More than 7 million people have watched this video on Facebook and listened to that sobering conversation happening off camera between that mother and her child. CNN's Bryn Gingras has the story.
Oh my God. So he's punching him though.
Blow after blow.
Why is he still punching him though?
That's a Euclid, Ohio police officer on top of 25-year-old Richard Hubbard III. This is Hubbard's arresting photo, his face swollen from those punches. The scuffle was also captured on police dash cam video, obtained by the News Herald, and happens 2.5 minutes into a traffic stop.
The registered owner shows a suspended license.
Officer Michael Amiot said in a written statement he pulled over Hubbard because the license plate showed the car's owner had a suspended license. Hubbard didn't own the car, but the person driving with him did.
Face away from me.
Then, in an official statement, Amiot explains what he says happened in the video. Quote, Richard quickly pulls his left arm from my grasp and in front of his body out of my control and view. I attempted 2 knee strikes on Richard. Both had missed. He was attempting to hold on to my legs as I did so. The suspect continually called us weak. Amiot is now on paid administrative leave from the department while the incident is under review. Records show Amiot resigned from a different Cleveland area police department 3 years ago after an investigation found he lied about a traffic stop. But for this case, his union is sticking by him, saying, quote, we hope that people will not rush to judgment, but rather will understand the literally split-second decision and response required of our police. The video has gone viral, highlighting tensions between police and the public. Hubbard didn't want to make any comments to CNN, but the ACLU and NAACP said they were appalled by the brutality. Though this happened last weekend, the Euclid police chief didn't respond to the public outcry until Thursday. He released a statement on his Facebook page apologizing for his delay and also saying there'll be a thorough investigation. Anna?
Bridget Grass, thank you. Let the countdown begin. What you need to know before that once-in-a-lifetime event in the sky.
Total solar eclipse, meaning everything lines up perfectly. And we have several cities that will be in that specific spot, including Casper, Wyoming, Kansas City, Greenville, South Carolina. But more specifically, with some of those particular locations, even if you aren't in this main blue line here of totality, even some of the cities outside of it, say like Cincinnati, Memphis, even around Oklahoma City or Atlanta, you'll still be close enough to get a decent enough view to actually see the eclipse. It just won't be perfect. Now, with that said, if you have plans to go outside, make sure you don't stare directly at the sun. Make sure you have specialized glasses for protection so that you don't end up causing damage to your eyes.
Looking good there, Allison. In this week's Fit Nation, a transgender cyclist makes history. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta has her story.
Cycling has offered me a sense of stability in my life. I work through every life situation on my bike.
Jillian Bearden is an elite cyclist, but her ride hasn't been easy.
I was born male as Jonathan Paul Bearden. Having this identity going on in your mind, you struggle on a daily basis.
To cope, Jillian turned to cycling and began competing in the male circuit. But her struggle with her identity persisted.
I was contemplating suicide. To want to kill yourself when you have children, when you have a wife, that's a hard decision to make, but that's how dark it is.
Jillian decided to tell her family, and with their support, she began transitioning. Jillian worked with officials at USA Cycling, and after months of talks and hormonal testing, they granted her a license to race as a female.
It was extremely emotional. Like I was finally on that woman's team that I've always longed for.
Now, she's about to compete in her first professional cycling race as a woman, the Colorado Classic.
This race is important because I'll be the first trans woman athlete in the United States to race in the pro field.
The Colorado Classic is a 2-day team cycling event that draws some of the top professional cyclists in the world.
When you have 83 other riders hitting speeds of 42 miles an hour, it's a crazy thing.
Jillian finished in time to qualify for the second race, a grueling 32-mile course in Breckenridge, Colorado. Racers climbed 3,600 feet uphill at an elevation already of almost 10,000 feet.
It's going to be intense and it's going to be really hard, but I'm really blessed to be able to participate in this.
The steep hills proved tough, and Jillian fell behind the pack. Still, she pushed through to the end. Out of 7.
For joining us this weekend, I'm Anna Cabrera in New York. Great to have you with us. Up first, demonstrators and counter-demonstrators taking to the streets of an American city 1 week after the deadly racial violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Today, this is the scene in Boston. Thousands of counter-demonstrators turning out in protest of a self-described free speech rally. Boston's police commissioner, William Evans, is expected to recap today's events this hour at 4:30 Eastern. We will monitor and we'll bring you updates. Police say this march and rally was mostly peaceful, but there were some tense moments. At one point, police moved in to separate rally participants from the counter demonstrators, and at least 8 people were arrested. President Trump tweeting about this just moments ago. Looks like many anti-police agitators in Boston. Police are looking tough and smart. Thank you. Moments later, he tweeted, great job by all law enforcement officers and Boston Mayor Marty Walsh. For more on the march and rally, CNN correspondent Sarah Seidner is joining us from Boston. Sarah, still looks like a large crowd behind you there. Give us a sense of the people who have shown up. Would you describe them as anti-police agitators?
No, there are people here who actually, I saw someone who worked for the mayor's office who was out here as well. There are people here from all different walks of life. And the people who organize this, like Black Lives Matter and some other groups, you know, if you talk to many of the Black Lives Matter advocates, there are lots of people saying we're not anti-police, we're anti-police brutality. So that's one thing that should differentiate them. But also there are a lot of people here who are here because they are very concerned about what is happening in the country, especially after what the country and the world saw happening in Charlottesville. Because of that is what you're seeing, such a large crowd, and it really is a diverse crowd. Were there some taunts towards police? Yes. Were there a few people who were yelling and screaming? Yes. But as a whole, there were thousands of people who showed up, and their message was, we shouldn't be silent. We have to stand up against white supremacy and stand up against racism. And that is what you're seeing now. There is a crowd, a smaller crowd that is now in the street here at Tremont Street, but they are here, and the police came through them, and they sort of went past them, and this group has gotten a bit smaller, but they are standing in the street.
Oh, we gotta go. We gotta get off the truck.
We're being sort of moved off the truck now, so we're going to kind of get down for you at this point in time.
All right, Sarah, we'll check back with you. Keep us updated on what's happening again in Boston. Largely peaceful protest happening there at this hour. Activism on the streets isn't the only backlash we're seeing after Charlottesville. The Trump administration is also under siege. In the last week alone, President Trump has been forced to disband 3 of his advisory councils after members began leaving. His Committee on Arts and Humanities is the very latest, disbanding just the day or so ago. More than a dozen charities have also canceled events at Trump's ritzy Mar-a-Lago club. And yesterday, billionaire Carl Icahn stepped down as an advisor to the president. Joining us, CNN presidential historian Douglas Brinkley, CNN contributor, and Washington Post reporter David Fahrenthold, CNN political commentator and former lieutenant governor of South Carolina, Andre Bauer, and former chairman of the Washington, D.C. Democratic Party, A. Scott Bolden. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Douglas, I want to start with you. Help us understand and contextualize this moment. Is there anything we can compare it to in the past?
Well, Donald Trump has done something that no president has ever done before, which is just kind of incite the country, unified people. I mean, so many Republicans have, joined forces with Democrats. You have people bailing on Mar-a-Lago. You have Kennedy Center for Arts winners saying they won't show up if the president's there. Athletes don't want to go to the White House. He's become the pariah president, and Charlottesville seems to me to be the tipping point. It's a point that's sort of mobilizing the anti-Trump opposition, and Trump now forever in history is going to be associated with very far right-wing extremists, even white supremacist policies because of his bungling of Charlottesville.
David, you broke the reporting about all these charities now pulling events from Mar-a-Lago. I think the latest number was 16. Are they canceling specifically because of the president's response to Charlottesville?
Well, a lot of them have not mentioned the word Charlottesville in their response, but it's clear from the timing of these cancellations that's what did it. This is all a wave that happened since the middle of last week. So after Charlottesville, a couple of days later, the Cleveland Clinic, based in Ohio, they canceled their charity. Since then, there's been 8 more, including one today. It's reached even to the charities that are just based in Palm Beach, kind of in the social bubble where Trump remains relatively popular. A big Palm Beach charity canceled just a few minutes ago. So it's been a pretty big wave of those charities, depriving his club of quite a lot of money.
How much of a financial hit is this for the president?
Well, it depends on whether these folks get their deposit back or not. But each one of these galas could be between $100,000 and $275,000 in fees for Trump's Club, just one for each night. So if for all these things, 9 galas and all have canceled, in addition to a couple of luncheons, we're looking at $1 million or more for Trump's Club. It's a significant amount of money.
Again, we're continuing to monitor the protests on the ground there in Boston. These are images from overhead. And let me turn to you, A. Scott. The president tweeting about these protests just within the last hour. He writes, quote, "Looks like many anti-police agitators in Boston. Police are looking tough and smart. Thank you. Great job by all law enforcement officers and Boston Mayor Marty Walsh." What's your response to that?
Well, based on your reporting, certainly there are not a lot of police agitators there. As a matter of fact, Boston police officers have done a really good job at keeping the protesters apart. But Donald Trump, as a super narcissist, as someone who supports, at least sympathizes or reports this racism, this hatred, this bigotry, all he knows is to fight and to put your finger on the wrong button to create some type of chaos or adversity, if you will. Instead of being the healer-in-chief, the consoler-in-chief, he's the agitator-in-chief. And until he figures out that he's not representing himself, that he's representing all of us, or at least is supposed to, you're going to get these tweets that simply agitate. Black Lives Matter is there. They've been nonviolent. No issues there. Only 8 people were arrested. But why were they there? They were there standing up to racism, hatred, and bigotry. What brought them there was racism, hatred, and bigotry. And what we saw the president do last Tuesday was support racism, bigotry, and hatred. And that's why you have the organizations, nonprofits, and otherwise pulling out of anything connected to him, because it's not in mainstream America. America wants to be better, but Donald Trump won't let it. And simply because you're the president and you got elected doesn't mean you've got to take us back. You've got to move us forward, and he simply is incapable of doing that.
Andre, there have been thousands of people who've turned out today, and they were protesting against hate, according to our Sarah Seidner and other reporters on the ground, mostly peaceful there. There have been a handful, a little bit more than a handful, of arrests made today. But is this the right response days after being accused of defending white nationalists?
You know, we know this is a difficult time in our history, and I worry as to what these mayors have to make a decision. It's almost as if we need some clause that says, look, we believe in freedom of speech, but when we believe that freedom of speech is getting ready to harm people, there needs to be some way for them to pump the brakes. When rioters are showing up in better gear than what the police officers have, most of those folks don't have the intentions that the average citizen does, that just shows up to be vocal and to let their feelings be known. We have people that are actually showing up in gear better than what folks like myself that are 15-year-plus police officers. It's concerning, and a few people can really mess up freedom of speech for everyone because they're out there to do more than just speak.
Yeah, a few people could do that, and by all accounts, it sounds like it was just a little more than a few people who were causing trouble out of thousands. So why is the president focusing on that and not sending out a message of peace and unity, and perhaps even cheering people who are protesting against hate?
Well, last Saturday, you were kind enough to have me on your show, and we talked about this very situation, and I said, give him a couple days, and he'll be able to see the facts, and he'll go back, and he did that. Maybe he didn't do it.
And then he reversed again the next day.
I wish he had done it a little quicker, a little more concise. Again,
Andre, you're not answering my question. Do you approve of the way the president is now handling this situation today? Do you think that his tweet about anti-police protesters being the ones who showed up at this Boston protest today and focusing on that, sending that message out to the world, is the right tweet to send out?
I try not to criticize. When President Obama was the president, I try not to criticize him on everything he did. It's easy to criticize people. Unless you have an explanation of a better way to handle it, just to beat on somebody all the time, I don't think it's healthy for the system. I don't think it's healthy for the process. Clearly, if I were the president, I would have handled it differently, but I am not the president of the United States, and so there are things he could have done better, and hindsight's always better than it is looking in today's vantage point. But again, I think the president's been very fair and judicious in almost everything he said.
Hey, Scott, I know wanted to respond.
You do? Can I respond to that?
Go ahead.
I'd like to respond to that. So he's forced to say that he denounces the KKK and the neo-Nazis in 2017, forced to do that. Before that, he says it was a blame on all sides, as if there's some moral equivalent. And then Tuesday, he has a complete breakdown, if you will, and goes back to defending neo-Nazis and other hate groups. Hate speech is not free speech. I don't care what the Supreme Court says, quite frankly. And when you have the president supporting that nonsense, that's taking us backwards, not forwards. And Andre, as a Republican, as a statesman, you have an obligation and a duty as a member of the Republican Party to stand up, to criticize, because there is no choice. Good versus evil. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Your president is wrong. You ought to stand up and call him what it is. Ask him to be better, or disassociate yourself from his support of hate speech, Nazis, bigotry, hatred. The Ku Klux Klan profits in this, and you ought to stand up and say so.
So are you ignore? But Andre, it seems like you're just ignoring what he said the very next day without a teleprompter. And he was very passionate, saying that there was violence on both sides and condemning both sides. He also said that there were very fine people on both sides. And we know very, very well who was on one side of that. And that was people who were white nationalists, KKK, neo-Nazis who were wandering around. What's not true?
There are people that showed up to protest that had no intention of violence whatsoever.
Exactly. A lot of those were the counter-protesters.
That's right.
On both sides, there were people with bad intentions and good intentions. And those few people with those intentions that were bad make everybody get painted with the same brush, but that's not the case. Not every single person that showed up to say, hey, we don't believe in taking this monument down, wanted it to be physical or violent. They just wanted to say they believe in something. And so to criticize all of them under the same blanket is not fair, and it's not right.
Guys, I have other people with us, so let me move the discussion forward. Douglas, some Republicans are specifically calling this president out by name because they do not approve. They do not agree with Andre. Two of the strongest statements have now come from Senators Bob Corker and Tim Scott. Let's listen.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence that he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful.
His comments on Tuesday started erasing the comments that were strong. What we want to see from our president is clarity and moral authority, and that moral authority is compromised when Tuesday happens. There's no question about that.
Doug, is it significant that some Republican lawmakers, Senator Corker there, starting to question President Trump's competency and stability?
I think it is important. And, you know, John F. Kennedy, who's grew up there in the Boston area, he wrote a book, Profiles in Courage, and it was about U.S. senators at key moments in American history have to stand up and be accounted for and do what maybe others in their party don't want to do. I think Bob Corker in particular this week, a man of the South, a conservative, his statement about how Donald Trump is really humiliating our country, I thought it was a proud moment for his career. You know, history's going to judge us now. There's going to be an honor roll of people that are for love and understanding and brotherhood and sisterhood, and then there's going to be hate mongers. And you don't want to be on the wrong ledger of history right now. Dr. Martin Luther King did his doctorate there at Boston. He learned nonviolent techniques there. He studied Paul Tillich and Henry David Thoreau and Reinhold Niebuhr and others. And so I'm very proud today to see the people in Boston doing what Americans should do, peacefully protest. And the police are doing a good job up there. But Donald Trump's tweets today have tried to make it an ugly event, trying to pit people against each other when it was simply a lot of good Americans saying we don't like hate.
David, let's take a look at just how many Republican lawmakers have called the president out by name over his response to Charlottesville. Now, this is really only a handful of the roughly 300 Republicans in Congress. Do you think we are really starting to see a shift away from this president among the GOP or not?
At this point, we'll know in the next few weeks. There's going to be some tests of President Trump's moral authority over Republicans or political authority over Republicans in the next few weeks on tax reform, on spending, on the debt ceiling. This is going to be September, particularly, is going to be a time when President Trump is going to wish he had some kind of authority or favors or anything else he could use over the Republican Congress to navigate these things that are coming up. Instead, he's used the last few weeks to go after somebody that used to be one of their colleagues, now Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and somebody who is the leader of the Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell. In addition to these statements about Charlottesville, it's caused a lot of those folks to step back. So I think he's done an amazing amount. Trump has done an amazing amount in the first 8 months of his presidency to alienate his own party, people that were ready, I think, to go to battle for him in the first months of this administration. So I think he's done a lot, and I think we've seen some Republicans already talking about let's create a Republican identity in Congress separate from President Trump, which is something I think we've not seen any party say about their own president in modern history.
Douglas, David, Andre, and A. Scott Bolden, thank you all for joining us. Coming up, the president opts out of attending this year's Kennedy Center honors after some of the celebrity guests threatened to boycott. We'll get a live report next. This year's annual Kennedy Center honors, more of the fallout after President Trump's comments about last weekend's deadly violence in Charlottesville. 3 honorees, TV producer Norman Lear, singer Lionel Richie, and dancer Carmen de Lavallada said they would boycott this White House reception for the arts celebration if the president were there. Now, Boris Sanchez is joining us from Bridgewater, New Jersey. Boris, what reason did the White House give for President Trump and the First Lady choosing not to attend?
Yeah, Anna, the White House essentially saying they didn't want to be a distraction to the honorees. It certainly is an unprecedented but perhaps not unexpected move if you consider that the president has skipped out on several other events, including the White House Correspondents' Dinner just a few months ago. Here's the official statement from the White House. I want to read it to you. It says, quote, "The president and first lady have decided not to participate in this year's activities to allow the honorees to celebrate without any political distraction." Again, this is unprecedented, Anna. There have been 4 other occasions, or rather 3 other occasions, this is the 4th, where a sitting president has missed the Kennedy Center honors. And it's important to point out, it's also unprecedented to have so many honorees coming out and saying things so critical of the president, Anna.
So, Boris, have the honorees spoken publicly now about their concerns specifically over the president's comments on Charlottesville?
Some of them have. That boycott that you mentioned of the reception at the White House before the actual gala event is set to take place. Some of that came after Charlottesville, but some of the criticism of the president actually came well before. I want you to listen to what Lionel Richie, a self-described friend of President Trump, had to say when he was considering whether or not to take part in the festivities. Listen.
I must tell you, I'm not really happy as to what's going on right now with the controversies, and they're weekly, daily, hourly. But I think I'm just going to wait it out for a minute and see where it's going to be by that time. This is going to be in December. Right. we may be in a whole other world by that time. But I'm gonna weigh it out. I totally understand Norman's point of view, and I understand where we are as a country right now is going backwards. But all we can do is kind of sit here and hold our breaths for a minute.
Again, Anna, it is unprecedented to hear that kind of perspective from some of these Kennedy Center honorees. Keep in mind, the other 3 presidents that have missed this event, Jimmy Carter, the first, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, apparently all had scheduling conflicts. We couldn't get clarity on specifically what they were, but this is the first time that we've seen a boycott, essentially, of the White House from the honorees of the Kennedy Center, Anna.
All right, Boris Sanchez, and we also saw the president in their White House statement now saying that it was to avoid any political distraction, the reason the First Lady and the President aren't going to attend. Thanks so much. Coming up, the mother of a woman killed and the chief strategist for President Trump is already back at his old job, running his old website and saying those who oppose him will be crushed. Sources tell CNN Bannon believed he put the pieces in place for his agenda to live on without him in the White House, and downplayed concern about his imminent firing, telling associates he would return to his, quote, killing machine, Breitbart. The president tweeting praise a couple of hours ago, writing, Steve Bannon will be a tough and smart new voice at Breitbart News, maybe even better than before. Fake news needs the competition. Here's CNN's Tom Foreman with how Steve Bannon rose and fell in the Trump universe.
Through the whole improbable, unexpected, roaring rise to power, the man whispering in Donald Trump's ear was Steve Bannon, a true believer at the ultra-right-wing Breitbart.com when few were.
They were laughing at me when I was saying, "Hey, this guy Trump is going to be very serious." So it's good to see that you're in the heat of combat now.
I remember that you looked and you said, "Boy, those are big crowds you're getting."
More than a cheerleader, Bannon was the campaign's ideologue, pushing explosive and persistent themes, some of which he'd crafted over years on terrorism.
We are in an outright war against jihadist Islamic fascism.
On big money interest.
Our financial elites and the political class have taken care of themselves and led our country to the brink of ruin.
On opponents within the Republican Party and on his holy grail.
Deconstruction of the administrative state.
Once called the most dangerous political operative in America, Bannon is a former Navy officer and a former banker who made an early investment in the Seinfeld TV series that led to money and media experience, which he transformed into political battering rams.
We do not want our kids and our grandkids' futures taken away from us, and we're going to stand up and do whatever we need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen.
He produced a series of blistering films promoting conservative views on immigration, climate change, and the Obama administration. Bannon's movies praise Sarah Palin and the right while savaging Hillary Clinton and the left.
With the Clintons, nothing is sacred. Everything is for sale. But we are the ones who are paying the price.
And through it all, he preached the gospel of a government run amok.
Unbelievable! Unbelievable!
By the time he and Trump joined forces, Bannon was fiercely going after the media and elites of all stripes.
I say every day, these working class men and women, middle class men and women are 10 times smarter than this intellectual group.
But Bannon's outsider status caused friction with D.C. insiders. He was never able to push any major legislation through to passage. He fell out of favor with some Trump family members, and critics never stopped howling about his ties to the nationalistic alt-right movement with its racist overtones.
We are a nation with a culture and a reason for being. And I think that's what unites us. And I think that is what's going to unite this movement going forward.
And even though he's now out of the White House, as he takes a familiar role as Breitbart's executive chairman, you can expect his war on Washington to roll on.
If you think they're going to give you your country...
That was Tom Foreman. Our thanks to him. Let's bring in our political commentators. Conservative Ben Ferguson, host of The Ben Ferguson Show, and Wajahat Ali, a New York Times contributor. Ben, some have said Bannon was the architect of the ideological movement that Trump supporters got behind. So with Bannon out, what does that tell you about where the president's head is at and where his administration might be heading?
Look, I think it's too soon to tell exactly where his administration may be heading. I think it's pretty clear here that Steve Bannon was a guy that's a great architect when it comes to a campaign and understanding how to connect with voters, and maybe that isn't serving the president as well within the White House. And he also did not get along with General Kelly, the new chief of staff. So I think Steve Bannon going back to Breitbart is going to go back to his roots, what he's really, really good at. I also think he'll probably very much still be in contact with this White House and the president, and to remind him on the issues and what is out there and what he promised and what he better be doing with the American voters. Otherwise, they may turn away from the president come next, the next election cycle. So I think this could actually be a blessing in disguise for both men. I think Donald Trump has to get a little bit more disciplined. I think Kelly is trying to make that be done. Look, I'm a realist here. The last, month or so have not been great for this White House. They've tried to, tweak things. I'm optimistic that General Kelly is going to be able to really accomplish something, especially now that there's not near as much infighting. This is going to be General Kelly's team now around him, and this is going to be Donald Trump and his son-in-law and his daughter. They got to put up now. A lot of them are not, experienced in politics, so they got to put up now big time.
Let me play you something the president said about Steve Bannon earlier this week.
He's a good man. He is not a racist, I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon. But he's a good person, and I think the press treats him, frankly, very unfairly.
So he was still defending Bannon even this week. Wajahat, do you think the president was forced into this decision, or was this all him?
This was probably all him, and it wasn't because of Steve Bannon's white nationalism, and at least there's one less white nationalist in the White House, but we still have a few more. It was most likely due to President Trump's very fragile ego, as we've discovered and heard from many people close to President Trump. He was increasingly disturbed that Steve Bannon was getting all the credit, that Steve Bannon was on the cover of Time magazine, that Steve Bannon was seen as the puppet master, and also in the last week or two, he was increasingly upset that Steve Bannon was most likely the source of leaks, as we've seen in the American Prospect article, where Steve Bannon torpedoed essentially Trump's fire and fury posture against North Korea and also the infighting against McMaster. So with two alpha dogs, you have one less alpha dog. You have Donald Trump, who, of course, let's not forget, takes 2 scoops of ice cream while everyone else gets 1 scoop of ice cream. But Donald Trump doesn't need Steve Bannon for white nationalism, as we've seen through his response or lack of response last week in Charlottesville, and his double standard when it comes to the protesters today in Boston. So white nationalism, at the very least, Anna, will be secure in the White House. But I know Ben Ferguson's going to make an excuse.
Using the word white nationalist over and over and over
again. You're not, Ben Ferguson.
Well, I deal with facts. I don't think that Steve Bannon is a white nationalist. I think that's a cheap political talking point that obviously somebody at the DNC told you to say 25 times on national TV. So I hope they send you some balloons and cookies after this appearance.
I'm not a political hack. I don't work for the DNC. I don't treat the president like a golden calf.
You certainly
have talking points. One at a time, please. Ben, finish your point.
Look, I think it's pretty clear you got your talking points down, so I'll say congratulations. You were a good soldier on TV, but it's not based in reality. Steve Bannon is a guy that understands the pulse of what got Donald Trump elected. You can attack him all you want to, and you can say the president was jealous of him. Look, I don't think the president was jealous. I think the fact is the president wants to succeed, and when things aren't going well, he's willing to make changes. That's the reason why we've seen a lot of changes recently, because he understands deep down things have not been amazing lately when it comes to the optics around the country. And I think he realized bringing in a new chief of staff, having a new White House press secretary, all of these different things. Some work,
don't you think the president kind of is shooting himself in the foot in some of these tweets that he's putting out? It doesn't matter who he is surrounded by?
Well, look, ultimately, I think you need to have the best advisors around you that you can get, and I do think that you've got to listen to them. I do think that many people believe that the president does need to calm down on Twitter a little bit. I think the president's pretty clear. That's his way he's going to communicate directly to the American people. Some days it hurts him, some days it helps him. It got him elected, so it obviously has worked more than it hasn't worked, but I do think as president, you have to look at Twitter and social media in a different context moving forward. You're no longer a candidate, you're the president.
I want to get Wajahat back in here. Let me read you the latest tweet from President Trump today. Well, 2 tweets, really. He says, looks like many anti-police agitators in Boston. Police are looking tough and smart. Thank you, and great job by all law enforcement officers in Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh. Wajahat, what message do those tweets send?
Well, unlike Ben and President Trump, I don't make moral equivalences between white supremacists, KKK, and neo-Nazis last week who descended in Charlottesville and the thousands of peaceful anti-racist protesters today. What it shows is that there's a double standard for President Trump. If there's an act of domestic terrorism last week, which yet a week later has yet to call it an act of domestic terrorism.
We have Marty Walsh, Mayor Marty Walsh, speaking live right now. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Let's listen.
In our city, there's been a lot of work done to be able to come in and to be able to protest, to be able to express themselves, all the way from Roxbury Community College, all the way to Boston Common. I was at Roxbury Community College earlier, and you could just feel a sense of pride being there, that people were going to come out and make a statement about how great we are here in the city of Boston. So I want to thank all of the people that came out today. I want to thank all the people that came out to share that message of love, not hate, to fight back on racism, to fight back on anti-Semitism, to fight back on the white supremacists that were coming to our city, on the Nazis that were coming to our city. I want to thank everyone that came here today. I want to thank everyone that came here and expressed themselves in such a positive, great manner today. I also want to take a special moment to thank the members of not just the Boston Police Department, but the MBTA Police Department, the State Police, as well as any other law enforcement authority, EMT, Fire Department, for helping us. What people don't really understand is that many of the people that we're here working today were ordered into work. It was their day off. It was their Saturday. It was their weekend. But they came in here. They carried themselves with dignity, and I'm proud of that work. And I'm proud of the fact that here in Boston we're able to have a very successful day. And again, I want to thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Evans now to talk more details about the day itself.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And like I said, the day, for the most part, it went off just as we had planned. I think you clearly seen we had both groups of demonstrators separated, and I think three groups of people came here today. There was three groups of protesters who came here today. There was obviously, the group for, the one for free speech. We had those who opposed the free speech, and unfortunately, we did have people who came here to cause problems. But overall, I thought the men and women of our department and all the other agencies who helped us performed really well. It was a long day. It was a hot day, and the separation worked well. When we went to move them out, there was a little bit of a confrontation. I think you've seen public order platoons come out. That was the plan. As you know, I was hoping we wouldn't have to bring them out, but I thought they did a good job moving that crowd. That's what they're trained for. Sometimes it doesn't look pretty, but that's what they're trained for. And I watched how it was done, and I thought they did a great job. I was witnessing bottles being thrown at them. I was seeing cones. I was a lot of insults, but they held the line well. And overall, again, everyone did a good job. 99.9% of the people here were for the right reason, and that's to fight bigotry and hate for the most part here today. We knew we were going to have some people who were going to cause problems, and we had to make, the latest is 27 arrests so far today. Most of them disorderly, a couple assault and batteries on police officers, and other charges. But overall, I thought we got the First Amendment people in, we got them out, and and no one got hurt, no one got killed, and we don't really have a whole lot of in fact, we have no significant at all property damage to the city. So great day for the city, and I'm really impressed. We probably had 40,000 people out here, standing tall against hatred and bigotry in our city, and that's a good feeling.
Commissioner, it seemed like the free speech rally was pretty small around that bandstand. Was it smaller than you expected, and did you have any problems with them, and when did you decide to put them in transport vans to get
Well, again, I didn't anticipate a whole lot. We had meetings with the individual who was leading it, and based on our discussions, I knew what we got. I expected, to tell you the truth, and that's why we had the strategy, and we had the exit strategy out the back, and that worked well. Unfortunately, as you've seen, we had some kids block the street, and it got a little confrontational, but they were given every opportunity to move, and as you've seen, we had to do a little pushing and shoving there. But even then, I was there. They were getting hit with bottles. They were getting pushed, and I thought they did a good job moving that crowd. So the plan went off the way we hoped to, and thank God nobody got hurt seriously. In fact, very little injury and very little property damage to that.
Can you speak about the perimeter between the counter protesters and the folks participating in the rally? How far of a space was that, and why was it set up that way?
Well, I think it was set up that way for a few reasons. Number one, we didn't want what happened in Virginia to happen here. We didn't want them at each other's throat. Also, there was a lot of talk in the week leading up about bottles being thrown with urine at our offices. And I wanted to make sure that that you had to have a good arm to basically throw and get at them. So, we basically wanted them separated. And I'm sorry to report, we did have some bottles thrown at our offices that did have urine in it. A couple of our officers were hit with that. They were hit with a lot of stuff today, and I'm very proud of the job they did, and it goes to the professionalism of this department.
And how wide was the space between the counter protesters and the folks in the rally?
I didn't measure it, but I'd estimate probably 35 yards, 40 yards.
How many police officers were used today?
Again, we don't talk about numbers here. Enough to do a great job the way they did.
Commissioner, the president tweeted maybe an hour or two ago that there were, quote, many anti-police people here. Would you agree with that?
I'm not going to get into politics here. We had a plan to get everyone in here safely today and get out, so I'm not getting into anything. I'm real proud of the people, the way they came and stood up for hatred and bigotry, and I'm more proud of the way my officers handled that crowd.
Commissioner, the organizer of the free speech rally says that they plan to do a longer program, but the police shut that program down. Is that accurate?
No, not to my knowledge. You know what? They came in here. We made it clear. They had their speakers. I think they knew 20,000 people were approaching, and so that was mutual agreed that they would get into the wagons. And we used the wagons to just get them out. So
they said some of the speakers that they had planned to join the free speech rally were not allowed through the perimeter to listen to the speech and to participate. Is that?
You know what? We had a job to do. We did a great job. I'm not going to listen to people who come in here and want to talk about hate. And you know what? If they didn't get in, it's a good thing because their message isn't what we want to hear.
What about the people?
Last question.
Can you talk about the soft approach that you took today?
Yeah, I thought, and again, if you looked at us, we pedal biked almost 20,000 people down here, real soft. We got in here inside the perimeter. We had our bicycle officers. We had officers with soft hats. It wasn't until we weren't able to get the wagons out here on Boylston Street that we had to bring the public order platoons out to get them out safely. And I thought that went real well. There was a lot of pushing and shoving there, but that's the way they were trained, and I thought they did the best they could under the circumstances. And, I'm proud of the way they did it. We train up for events like this, and, we've handled Occupy, we've handled Patriots parades, and I was confident in the job they would do, and I think you've seen it done today.
Was there anything you thought you could have improved today?
What's that?
Is there anything you would have done differently security-wise?
I mean,